From the Virginia Audio Collective at WTJU 91.1 FM and Brown College at the University of Virginia, this is Symposia. Welcome back to Symposia. I'm Sage Tangway. We are finally at the end of a wonderful fall semester that saw many off-air conversations about community and media. Today's episode will feature one of those impactful exchanges, inspired by the work of photojournalist Louie Palu. In partnership with the Virginia Quarterly Review, Brown College hosted him in November to present his latest piece, The Next Cold War, about the distant early warning system and the preparation for war with Russia in the Arctic. You can read the article and see Louie's amazing photographs in the VQR's Fall 2024 issue, as well as Louie's larger portfolio on his website, louiepalu.com. The audio from Louie's visit will actually be split into two episodes, this one focusing on his presentation, and the next will feature the Q&A that followed, as well as some thoughts from a student attendee who plans to enter into media production. While there will be some references to photographs, and at least one time that I'll break in to describe an image from the presentation, the implications of Louie's work go far beyond what we are able to see through his viewfinder. The photographs are the veritable tip of the iceberg as we consider war, nationhood, and technology in the time of climate change. The event began with a few words from Brown College principal John Castine.
And it's my great pleasure to host an event for Louie Palu, whose work I have admired for 20 years, in conversation with my friend and colleague, Paul Reyes. I believe very much in partnerships. I think that we can accomplish more in partnership with other people and other organizations than we can in isolation on our own. So when I think about VQR in particular, a magazine that has been incredibly important to me since I was in high school and started reading seriously. It is possible, for example, for Brown College to bring someone like Louie Palu, who, out of his wisdom, would probably not answer my emails if they didn't actually come from Allison and Paul. And it's possible for me, as the person running Brown College, to give my colleagues and friends at VQR access to students and faculty that they would not necessarily have an easy way to reach out to otherwise. Professionally, academically, intellectually, culturally, artistically, we can almost always accomplish more in partnerships than we can in isolation. This partnership matters to me in part because VQR matters to me. VQR has a long history of politically engaged work in cultural criticism, art, literature, and thought that has always been on the right side of history. It's always been a bit ahead of the curve. When I was coming up as a writer, VQR was one of the places where I could see that the bar had been set. Let me also talk specifically for a minute about introducing this conversation between Paul Reyes, the editor of VQR, and our guest Louie Palu. I became aware of Louie's work about 20 years ago when I was working as a volunteer editorial assistant for the magazine, and we began publishing his work from Afghanistan. Having looked at a lot of photographs, having cut my teeth as a photographer and darkroom person when I was in high school, and having thought a lot about Susan Sontag and Roland Barthes and John Berger, and thinking about the traditional distinctions between editorial photography. Here's a picture of something that the words in the magazine article or newspaper article are describing. Or documentary photography. Here is evidence or proof of an event or a fact. Or fine art photography. Here is something that is beautiful, and we reckon with it on the terms of its beauty. Photography historically had understood that those were three different acts, three different ways of thought, three different understandings of what an image could do or be. And as I've watched Louie's work over the years, I have been aware that it was a long-form argument against those artificial distinctions. It has always struck me as artistically impeccable, morally located, and technically superb. I don't have a lot of heroes, but one of them is to my left. So, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Please join me in welcoming Paul Reyes and Louie Palu.
In case you aren't familiar with Louie's work, Louie's projects have been selected for a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Arnold Newman Prize, the World Press Photo Award. It has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the National Geographic, Der Spiegel. It is held in numerous collections, including the Museum of Fine Arts Boston and the National Gallery of Art. He has appeared in VQR numerous times as well, beginning back in 2008 with dispatches from Guantanamo Bay. In the years that he has worked with us, he has embedded with interrogators, soldiers, miners, and has delivered some of what I think are the most indelible images of the war in Afghanistan and some really classic work of war portraiture. If you haven't visited our Afghanistan archive on VQR's website, I highly encourage you to do so because his contributions are incredible. He has also helped us earn a National Magazine Award, and I believe you are the very first recipient of the VQR Prize in Photography. Louie Palu.
Well, we could dim the lights a little. Okay. You want to look at the pictures, not me so much. I want to say that I just realized as I looked up John's email from 2010 or 11, I owe him a hockey stick. It's a long story, but I feel like the interest that might have accrued could be quite big. So anyway, thank you for coming out. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for everybody here at the UVA VQR team for hosting me. You heard that I covered war, so there's going to be some tough images to look at. I don't think anyone's afraid of hunting, but we're going to go to the Arctic. We're going to think about hunting and how people get their food in the Arctic, some people. So there's going to be a lot of dead animals. So if anyone's going to be sensitive to that, I think you're going to be fine. Just tell yourself, this is what I'm going to see and it's cool, okay? So I grew up in Canada. I think it's always important to know where people come from, like what their experience is. So my parents were children in the Second World War in Italy. They came to Canada, grade 4 education. They worked as laborers. But I went hunting and fishing because they got to Canada and it was like the land of plenty. And that kind of leads us into what's a theme I'm thinking about these days is the myth of inexhaustibility, kind of like the buffalo hunt. Like we just resources forever, which there are not. And I think that that's an important to think of when we think about the Arctic or America itself or our allies and neighbors like Mexico and Canada.
As way of introduction, Louie presented the breadth of his portfolio, from portraits of Marines in Afghanistan to photographs documenting the drug war in Mexico, to the insurrection in January 2021. Paul asked him to describe how he decides which crises and events to cover.
As you can tell, I'm very deliberate. It's social political. My parents were children in the Second World War, and paramilitary Nazi units controlled their area, and I had relatives who were partisans fighting them. So, lynchings, hanging people, assassination, bombings, this is their childhood. So I grew up hearing that oral history. We all in this room, no matter where you're from, have an important oral history. Doesn't matter where you're from, it's important, and it shapes who you are and how you think. And so that shapes how I think. Like, I was taught to hide under the stairs because that's what my parents did when they were kids, when the Gestapo came looking for them. So for me, I'm like, okay, who are these? I didn't understand. I wasn't able to verbalize this like I can now, but now I'm like, I know what those visceral feelings are. Like I knew when like neo-Nazi skinheads showed up in Toronto when I was a kid, I'm like, oh, these are these people. I'm like, so I had this visceral feeling. So I've grown my practice as a journalist to look for these things that are going to hurt people, hurt things we believe in and love, So U.S. troops liberated my parents' village. So I have a very particular view when it comes to that of what the United States is from that narrative. That doesn't hold me back from critically thinking about the United States history, but that's a thing, So yeah, I'm like watching right-wing extremists. I read books. I follow social media. I place myself in places to watch what's unfolding. Sometimes something's unfolding, I don't quite understand it, and I collect information about it, or I insert myself as a photographer, and I sometimes learn later on when I look at my own work. At the moment, I know I can work safely. I've learned over the years I can function in these spaces where things are going on, like whether it's -80 or there's a battle going on, or I'm in a place where there are people who are racist or have views that are not of the views of the democratic order of the United States, social justice, all this big umbrella. of issues that are important to me, climate change. And I try and listen to everybody. I listen and I gather and I start thinking of what the images might be that are records of this. And sometimes it could take a year or two where I look at 20, 30,000 photographs and I'm like, oh, wow, this picture never meant much now, but it means something later on. So, I just knew I didn't know January 6th was going to turn into what it was going to turn into. Just like our project, when I'm going to get into this issue where I go along the Russian border in Finland and Norway, I had a feeling after reading Putin's, a biography on Putin by a New York Times Moscow bureau chief, that, I'd read it, I don't know, I think a friend gave it to me around 2015, 16. I read it and I thought, he wants to bring back like the old empire. And that just started making me think, like, when I was in Afghanistan, I'm like, oh, and this will lead right into my Arctic problem, like, wait, okay, the border in Georgia, the country in the Caucasus region, okay, that video of the submarine planting the Russian flag on the seabed of the North Pole, like, this is the activity of someone who wants to re-expand or change something. And I just started thinking, when I was in Afghanistan, what happened to the distant early warning line? Let's just stop right there, distant early warning line, but let's just understand where we're going and what the Arctic is. The Arctic is 100 different things. First of all, you have to know how to read the temperature up there because you think it's minus 32. This is in Celsius, by the way. And it's really with the wind is minus 51. And when you're past a tree line, minus 51 is the temperature. Okay? And minus 51 in Fahrenheit is almost minus 60. So at about minus 40 something, it reverses and Fahrenheit starts going more. So it's a place where, let's understand, the air can kill you. I started thinking, okay, the distant warning line was a radar line that was built for an imagined attack over the North Pole from the Soviet Union, now Russia, by missiles or bombers. That's the shortest route of attack over Canada. Or 22 miles away, the United States is closer to Russia than almost all of Europe. I thought, wow, like, what happened to all those radar bases? Like, this is the radar defense of the United States. Still, for 70 years, there's people sitting at a computer waiting sensors for an imagined attack that could happen. And imagination is one of the greatest tools you'll ever learn to wield in your entire life. Those little triangles with the names, those are forward operating bases that they fly fighters up to, refuel, and then fly north. Okay, they're forward operating lines. And still to this day, some of it's automated. There's like over 100 radar stations waiting for this attack. And so the air can kill you, it can freeze your camera, and it freezes because I'm breathing and the vapor's coming out of my mouth, which is me dehydrating. When your vapor's coming out of your mouth, that's you dehydrating in the winter. You can dehydrate faster because you're breathing out and it's freezing the moisture and you're leaving your body and you're not putting any back in. And that vapor is going in my camera and freezing the metal together. So it can render photographic technology and digital technology. The Arctic I'm going to start with, which is in North America mostly, cell phones are useless. So, and just remember the word, what technology is and what we think of technology, okay? That's going to be a theme here as well. King William Island, it's an island in those sets of islands above Canada, it's like an archipelago. We're snowmobiling on the land, and we stop in him with an Inuit hunter, Paul, and we stop, and he lights a cigarette, he says, let's take a break. He goes, can you take out the GPS and like tell us where we are? And I'm like, I'm the photographer, I don't have a GPS. You have the GPS. You're from here. He goes, well, how do you think we got around for 1,000 years? You think we just traveled around, or you think we learned how to read the lines in the snow so we knew north, east, south, west? He goes, even without the stars, we know how to travel here. We are the original scientists of the Arctic, is what I thought when he's telling me. Canada has a volunteer unit of soldiers all over rural Canada, but in the Arctic, they're the Canadian Rangers, and they wear red hoods so you can see them far away. And they're wearing parkas. A parka is Inuit technology. A padded jacket, insulated jacket, with fur around the hood was invented by the Inuit in the Arctic. There's no like precedent where they're like, oh, we have the Mac computer from 1980, now let's advance it to 90 and the internet. They took animal skin and innovated it. That is technology, okay? to survive in a place where the air can kill you. And they've done it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And we think of the Arctic as this lone, isolated place, which right now, parts of the Arctic, so to a certain degree far north, have like 2 months of darkness. So darkness, permanent darkness, is a part of an aspect of the Arctic, which means that plants really can't grow there, not only from the darkness, but from the permafrost of the ground. So no trees, there's a tree line, except where I'm going to take you in the issue of VQR. But there's this whole idea of isolation. But then there's the distant early warning line. This is Uktivik, which is used to be known as Barrow. That's the most northerly point in the United States. And these are U.S. Marines in the Arctic for the first time. And I'm like, wow, Marines in the Arctic, like, they're preparing. They're preparing to go to Norway. This is before the invasion, before Norway's already a member of NATO, but before Finland and Sweden. And I kind of start thinking, well, if we're on this side of Russia, who's on the other side and what are they doing? Because people can talk about Russia being as injured as they want. They have a massive military with a vast experience in the Arctic. So I started saying, hey, can I come with you? And I want to just make a record of this moment. It's the first time the Marines were ever in the Arctic. Oh, and there were Green Berets in this too. Does anyone know what kind of special forces Green Berets are? A type of special forces that can train us. They could come here like, hey, we're going to make a guerrilla army here at UVA, and we're going to make you into a little paramilitary group, kind of like anti-North Vietnamese forces in Vietnam, or maybe up in the Arctic in a village. You know. So I thought that was very, very interesting. More technologies, learning how to turn a side of a hill, digging into snow into a survival cave. These are pilots from NATO. And I started thinking, wow, this is not just a Canada-America thing. Countries from Germany are coming to train in the Arctic in case they crash. Soldiers from the south learning how to build igloos. Igloo is a technology. It's a tent you can make anywhere in the Arctic in the winter out of snow blocks if you have a knife. You know, it's pretty incredible. And you can survive minus 50 and you can warm it up with a candle. Signaling, there's no cell phone signal. Your plane crashes. I mean, everything you train for or you're in the training can be disaster. People have been killed on these trains. So it's not just, even though it's training, it's real because it's minus 50 and you can die. I think when I was in Finland, someone got run over by a tank. You know, I mean, you're around all this equipment, right? You can fall in the water and drown. You can get hypothermia, frostbite. And when you go to the Arctic, what I really listened to, I listened to where I was, not just people talking, but learning to listen to the place, is that nature is the ultimate power. And that's the theme that really is shining in all these photographs. There's literal things happening like that. So you take a smoke grenade and stay in the X so the plane can see where you are. But natural resources, the inexhaustibility. This is the largest operating oil field in the United States. And it was permitted and a pipeline was built because of a different war in the 70s in the Middle East. That's Dead Horse. It's a work camp. It's not really a town where where there's a community. Workers fly in and out. So that's at the very top of Alaska, not far from the Canadian border. But the first oil production in the Arctic was not us. We always, you know, we advanced kind of, I don't want to say we're colonialists because we're not, but, you know, sort of this colonial thinking, we have the technology. Well, the Inuit were catching seals and taking oil out of seals and making lamps thousands of years ago before us. So oil production, but theirs is environmentally friendly and does not contribute to climate change. But seal hunting, and every part of the seals used, the oil, the meat to eat, and the fur for making jackets and coats, which you can make a parka out of, or gloves. The ground's frozen, there's polar bears. What do you do with your garbage? You burn it. These are the realities of the Arctic. This is in Resolute, which is the island, and that's, yes, named after the ship that the president's desk is made out of, right in the middle of the Canadian archipelago. Fishing through, I mean, imagine they know how to hang nets like underneath the ice by floating a stick under the ice. I mean, the technology. Nets used to probably be made with parts of animals. And that the Rangers, like this volunteer military unit, everything they learn is about how to light a fire, how to catch food, because it's all about survival. Automatic weapons barely work in the Arctic. They freeze. You have to use bolt-action rifles. This is part of a fishing weir. A fishing weir is like a circle of rocks you build. You walk up in the river. This is a basic explanation. The fish go in the fishing weir. You close the rock circle. It's much bigger in the river than this. And the fish are trapped. It's a net made of rocks. All of these things are technology. There is a summer in the Arctic, but we have to use this to imagine a time where eventually there will be no ice. And the reason why we need to think about the Arctic in terms globally is in a simple way, the Arctic is like the air conditioner of the world. All that water that goes under the Arctic that doesn't get warmed up when there's no ice, when it's like, people have called it a blue Arctic, you know? And that's another narrative. People are thinking of, wow, if the ice melts, there could be like oil and mining up there. People are thinking of economic advancement, whereas at that point, I think the water level on the shores of a lot of coastal cities and towns will be so high, some cities might be underwater, but there'll be more disaster than that. So it's kind of like going back to thinking about what your role is and what you're interested in and how you can play a part in that discussion so that we all make our world secure in a way that benefits us all. So now let's look at this. Okay, for the podcast, what you're seeing right here is this is the tundra. We're in Rankin Inlet, and there's some shrubbery, no trees past the tree line, top of Hudson's Bay. And the scene is some, let's call it processed. You can call it butchered or skinned. Processed caribou meat on a rock it's a gray day. You know what this is? This is a cutting board in a kitchen in a refrigerator. Because the rock, I mean, if you're Inuit or if you're indigenous, whether you're Inupiat up in Alaska, wherever you are, you use the rocks as your cutting board. You don't need plastic or wood cutting boards. There is no trees. And also the temperature, the ambient temperature isn't very high, so the meat doesn't go bad. And you get a lot of your nutrients from raw meat. I actually ate some of this, and it was very good if you eat meat. But up there, you can't really grow a garden, especially when it's minus 50. So this will change. The idea that this place is like a living refrigerator, and the way you catch your food or obtain your food can be maintained, like in your refrigerator home. It's their environment. Here's another kind of one of these moments, right? So I always think of photography like landscapes, portraits, and still lifes. That's what we're always kind of what I'm looking for, and then a few things in between that. What we have here on one side of the picture is we have jerry cans of fuel. This is sort of the industrial side, depending on who you are, you can call it sort of the legacy of colonialism up in the north. But now a lot of the Inuit communities use gas-powered snowmobiles and boats. And on the side, you have like a caribou head with some antlers, and there's some Arctic char, which is kind of like a salmon trout of the north. And it's like cubed bits of Arctic char attached to the fish like strings. You know what this is? That's a sushi hanging rack, right? Makes sense, eh? The original scientists of the Arctic are the Inuit, and they have survived for thousands of years by being at one with nature because they understand the power of it, and they wield it to what suits them to survive. These are two hunters after hunting a caribou. No problem. And they're carrying half of the animal on each, and one of them is exhausted on the ground. They're carrying it for a few miles. They turn the fur into a backpack that he wrapped around his head to carry the meat on one, and on the other he turned the tendons into straps like a backpack and just carry the meat back to camp. Whereas the US military needs rations. You have to fly them up, they have plastic. When you hunt the caribou, everything goes right into the environment. And soldiers are from all over the United States when they serve in Alaska. This is up in the middle of near Black Rapids. It's kind of lower central Alaska, just below the Arctic Circle. The man in the middle is covering his face, is kind of capturing the feeling of everybody. I mean, some of the soldiers are from Mississippi or Brooklyn. They've never been in winter like this before. So this is a survival course.
At this point in the presentation, Louie pulled up a photo that depicts a swarm of troops parachuting down into the Arctic landscape. You can see it for yourself on his website, louiepalu.com, in the distant early warning gallery.
This is near Fort Greely, which is the base with all the counter nuclear missile base, where that didn't come out right. If we're ever attacked, they have the missiles that shoot down the attacking missiles. And I always, I always think of the contrast where when I wanted to get this photo, they said, hey, do you want to take pictures of paratroopers? I'm like, why? I just thought, oh, maybe. I looked at the landscape, I thought, see, because you can't beat a mountain. A mountain is way more powerful than us. like a tidal wave or an ocean. And I think understanding the Arctic or the world in that context makes you a more powerful thinker if you understand the world that we're in. You know, we can forget about this living in I live in it too, with iPhones and cars, but the planet is a very powerful thing. And this sort of brought me to when I was photographing this, I thought, you know, we think we're destroying the environment, like the world, sir. We're destroying our world because we have a big ego. We're not destroying the world will destroy us. We're destroying the environment the world gives us to survive. It could be scorched earth and we could all be dead. The planet will still be here because it's way more powerful than us. And that's what this photograph taught me. That imagine we can jump out of a plane with a piece of fabric and parachute to the ground and we can go fight a war and we have nuclear submarines, but you still can't beat that mountain. So these are the kinds of the things I've tried putting in my photographs. There's lots of plane crashes up there. You know, the weather up there, you get up there and they're like, hey, don't get hurt because medevac's 10 days because of weather. So wind, air can beat you. So I remember this moment. It's the first time they flew a plane this big up in Hull Beach, where one of the dew lines are, and they unloaded these Inuit sleds made of wood. And I thought, yep, this is it. The $200 million airplane that can fly a tank to any war zone, but they're unloading an indigenous piece of technology. But it's interesting. It's made out of wood. There's no trees up there. Originally, sleds were made of animal parts, frozen together with ice. That was the glue, ice. Imagine. So survival training's real. It's not like simulated. It is, but it really is minus 40 when you do things like this. And this is the piece in the Virginia Quarterly Review, The Next Cold War. When I started this, Russia had not invaded Ukraine yet. There was a conflict ongoing since 2014 and simmering up to before that. But I just thought this was a very interesting place because Finland was not in NATO, and Finland had fought a war against what was then the Soviet Union, but say led by Russia in 1939, and they annexed land, kind of like they've done to Ukraine. And I thought, what are the lessons we could learn there? So Finland is like the front line to most of Western Europe and the Arctic. And they have a very, very big military. Some people have called them the Sparta of Europe. So Finland has actually fought a war against Russia. Very few countries can say they've done that. So it's an expertise there. So, you know, checking your feet every day for frostbite. I mean, if your feet are sweating right now, mine are. It's normal. You go outside at minus 30, you can get frostbite on your toes. Doesn't matter how good your boots are. Everybody sweats. So one thing they did was I learned they put newspapers in their boots and the newspapers absorb the sweat off their socks and they throw the newspaper out, put more dry newspaper in. Technology. This is me above water. It's the last photo in the photo essay in the magazine. And that is a Norwegian diver and it's snowing above and I use my flash to light the snowflakes. Right? So this is a photograph of weather, really. And he's learning how to find unexploded bombs from the Second World War. They get 300 to 400 calls a year still in Norway from the Second World War. So we talk about legacy of war. I think the administration rescinded the ban on anti-personnel mines today. The U.S. for Ukraine. So that I saw that as a headline somewhere. But just think how long unexploded bombs stick around. Skiing. This is a place where moving around on skis is super important. There's a really fantastic story if you want to look about Norwegian Special Forces skiing to blow up a Nazi heavy water plant that they had built because they were advancing on building an atomic bomb faster than us. A lot of incredible histories and these kinds of skills that are lost or trying to be rediscovered by militaries as they start rethinking the Arctic. This is on the Russian border in Norway. I went out with because of the size of the countries, their border guard is their military. Motorcycle scouts for tanks, also for scouting for the tanks, but also for attracting enemy tanks to the sitting Finnish tanks. At the end of the Cold War, Finland started buying all the Western countries who were like, we don't need tanks anymore, the Cold War's over. They bought everybody's tanks and they have the largest artillery range in Western Europe and the largest tank division in Western Europe. That's a polar bear. No polar bears in Finland. It doesn't attach to the North Sea. There are polar bears north of Norway, but a lot in Canada. A polar bear will kill you with maximum violence in a flash. It'll snap your head off your neck. Beautiful animals. And so you know, Arctic in Greek means place of bears, Antarctica, place of no bears. And there's penguins in Antarctica, but not in North Pole. That's the size of the paw print. It's 3 times the size of a black or brown bear, probably, or even bigger. That's my foot, size 12. I see the gasping look on everybody in the front row here. 60 yards in 4 seconds. 40 yards in 6 seconds backwards. You have to do polar bear training with a rifle. When they charge, it's pretty fast. This is the, if you want to be a journalist, the wonderful accommodations in some places. That is a rain poncho house, you know. In addition to the work I've done with VQR, if you want to read more about the Arctic, I did this series at Bloomberg, and it goes into a lot of things to do with Alaska, the United States position in the Arctic, and it has fishing and oil drilling, which are really, really important things to read about. Almost all the fish in our food supply in the United States come from Alaska. Alaska produces more fish than the rest of the country put together. And there we are, to the discussion portion of the...
Thank you.
You can read The Next Cold War by Louie Palu in the fall 2024 issue of the Virginia Quarterly Review, or see it on their website, vqronline.org. Louie's full portfolio can be seen on his website, louiepalu.com. Special thanks to Louie Palu, Paul Reyes, and the Virginia Quarterly Review for co-hosting this talk. Check out part 2 of this episode to hear the Q&A that took place after the presentation. Symposia is a production of Brown Residential College at the University of Virginia and the Virginia Audio Collective at WTJU 91.1 FM. Tell your friends to find us wherever they get their podcasts.